America First. America First represents the revival of American civic nationalism centered on sovereignty, protectionism, and national pride. Popularized by Donald Trump, it argues that globalization, mass immigration, and foreign entanglements weakened the U.S. economy and identity. The movement calls for strong borders, industrial revitalization, and prioritizing American workers over international interests. While economically nationalist and skeptical of free trade, it maintains populist appeal through anti-elite rhetoric and patriotic imagery. Its policies, such as tariff-driven reshoring, immigration restrictions, and withdrawal from multilateral treaties, reflect a broader attempt to realign American power around self-interest rather than global leadership. Hindutva. The Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, is India's ruling political force, representing a form of religious and cultural nationalism known as Hindutva. It seeks to redefine India as a Hindu civilizational state, emphasizing unity, heritage, and national pride. Under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the BJP combines Hindu traditionalism with economically liberal, pro-market reforms, promoting privatization, infrastructure growth, and global investment to modernize India's economy. Supporters see it as a resurgence of national confidence and cultural strength after colonial and secular dominance. Critics argue it marginalizes minorities and weakens pluralism, but its influence defines Indian politics and identity today. Fidesz. Fidesz, led by Viktor Orban, is Hungary's dominant political party and a central model of European nationalist governance. It champions the concept of illiberal democracy, emphasizing national sovereignty, Christian heritage, and resistance to multiculturalism and EU centralization. Fidesz blends populist conservatism with state-guided capitalism, favoring domestic industries and social programs that reinforce national cohesion. Orban's government portrays itself as the defender of Hungarian identity against migration and globalist elites. Supporters view it as reclaiming self-determination after decades of foreign influence, while critics accuse it of undermining democratic institutions and eroding checks and balances in the name of nationalism. Brothers of Italy. Brothers of Italy, led by Giorgia Meloni, represents the resurgence of Italian nationalism within mainstream politics. Rooted in post-war conservative and national Republican traditions, it promotes cultural identity, family values, and sovereignty against globalization and EU overreach. The party blends economic pragmatism with strong social conservatism, favoring lower taxes and protection for domestic industries while preserving Italy's Catholic and traditional heritage. Meloni frames her government as defending national dignity in a globalized world. Supporters see a patriotic restoration of Italian pride. Critics warn of creeping authoritarianism and the normalization of far-right populism within Europe's political establishment. National Rally. National Rally, led by Marine Le Pen, represents France's most prominent nationalist and populist movement. It blends civic nationalism with protectionism, cultural conservatism, and fierce opposition to mass immigration. Rooted in the idea of defending French identity and sovereignty, it challenges the European Union's influence and advocates strict border controls and economic policies favoring French workers. While distancing itself from its extremist past, the party retains a strong anti-globalist tone and appeals to working-class voters disillusioned with mainstream elites. Supporters see it as preserving national culture. Critics warn it risks undermining liberal democracy and European unity. Zionism. Zionism, as embodied by Israel's ruling party, is a nationalist movement asserting the Jewish people's right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland. Founded on both religious and historical claims, it emphasizes Jewish unity, security, and sovereignty over contested territories. Under Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel nationalism promotes military strength, economic liberalization, and resistance to international pressure regarding Palestinian statehood. The ideology links faith, history, and statehood into a single vision of national revival. Supporters see it as essential for Jewish survival and independence. Critics argue it entrenches occupation and exclusion, fueling ongoing conflict with Palestinians and regional instability. Reform UK. Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, carries forward the populist nationalism that powered Brexit. It promotes British sovereignty, tight border control, and withdrawal from international regulations perceived to undermine self-rule. The party combines civic nationalism with anti-establishment rhetoric, arguing that the political elite betrayed ordinary citizens through mass immigration and globalist policies. Economically, Reform UK supports lower taxes, deregulation, and domestic energy independence, positioning itself as both nationalist and pro-market. Supporters see it as defending democracy from unelected bureaucrats. Critics view it as divisive and simplistic. Despite limited seats, it strongly influences the UK's political agenda and discourse. AfD, Alternative for Germany, is Germany's leading nationalist and right populist party, founded in 2013 amid opposition to EU bailouts. it evolved from Euroscepticism into a broader platform emphasizing national identity, anti-immigration policies, and cultural conservatism. The AFD criticizes mass migration, multiculturalism, and what it calls political correctness, portraying itself as the defender of German sovereignty and heritage. Economically liberal, but socially traditional, it supports lower taxes, domestic energy production, and protection of small businesses. Supporters see it as reclaiming pride in national culture. Critics accuse it of xenophobia and threatening Germany's post-war democratic and multicultural consensus. Kurdish nationalism. Kurdish nationalism seeks self-determination for the Kurdish people, an ethnic group divided among Turkey, Iraq, Syria, and Iran. Rooted in a long struggle against suppression and statelessness, it aspires to cultural autonomy or full independence through movements like the PKK in Turkey and the Kurdistan regional government in Iraq. The Kurdish cause blends ethnic pride with secular, often left-leaning politics, emphasizing language rights, gender equality, and local governance. Militarily, Kurdish forces gained international recognition fighting ISIS, strengthening their legitimacy. Supporters see them as freedom fighters. Critics view them as separatists, destabilizing regional states and boundaries. Palestine. Palestinian nationalism is a movement for the self-determination and statehood of the Palestinian people, rooted in opposition to colonialism and displacement following the 1948 creation of Israel. It seeks sovereignty over the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, uniting political, cultural, and religious dimensions of identity. Organizations like Fatah and Hamas represent differing approaches, from diplomatic state-building to armed resistance, but share the goal of independence. The movement draws global solidarity as a symbol of anti-occupation struggle. Supporters frame it as a fight for justice and recognition. Critics argue internal divisions and violence hinder peace and long-term stability. Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is a transnational movement advocating the unity, solidarity, and empowerment of African peoples worldwide. Emerging during the colonial era through figures like W.E.B. Du Bois and Kwame Nkrumah, it calls for liberation from imperialism and the creation of a shared African identity across nations and the diaspora. In modern times, it influences the African Union, cultural revivalism, and economic cooperation efforts like the African Continental Free Trade Area. While less about statehood than collective progress, it remains a unifying ideology against neo-colonial dependency. Supporters see it as Africa's moral compass. Critics note its limited practical cohesion. Pan-Arabism. Pan-Arabism is an ideological movement seeking unity among Arab nations based on shared language, culture, and historical identity. It rose to prominence in the mid-20th century under leaders like Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt and the Ba'ath Party in Syria and Iraq. Initially tied to anti-colonialism and socialism, it envisioned a single, powerful Arab federation capable of resisting Western dominance. Although weakened by rivalries and divergent national interests, its legacy still shapes Arab political identity and rhetoric. Supporters view it as a dream of regional solidarity and pride. Critics argue it failed to adapt to modern political realities. Catalonia. Catalan nationalism is a regional movement in northeastern Spain, advocating recognition, autonomy, or full independence for Catalonia. Rooted in a distinct language and cultural identity, it gained modern momentum through economic grievances and resentment towards centralized Spanish governance. The 2017 independence referendum, declared illegal by Madrid, sparked mass protests and deepened polarization across Spain. Today, Catalan parties remain influential, promoting linguistic preservation and fiscal autonomy within a democratic framework. Supporters view the movement as a fight for self-determination and cultural dignity. Critics see it as divisive and destabilizing to Spain's unity and the European model of regional integration. Basque. Basque nationalism centers on the identity and autonomy of the Basque people, whose territory spans northern Spain and southwestern France. It emphasizes the preservation of the Basque language, cultural traditions, and self-government. The movement once included violent separatism through the militant group ETA, which sought full independence until its dissolution in 2018. Modern Basque nationalism is largely peaceful and political, focused on expanding autonomy within Spain's federal framework. Supporters see it as a model of democratic regionalism, balancing identity and stability. Critics argue it remains exclusionary and complicates broader efforts towards Spanish national cohesion. Sanseito. Sanseito is a rising nationalist and populist party in Japan, emphasizing cultural preservation, self-sufficiency, and resistance to Western liberal influences. Founded in 2020, it promotes traditional Japanese values, family-centered ethics, and public health sovereignty while opposing large-scale immigration and globalist policies. The movement blends nationalism with spiritual and moral renewal, arguing that Japan must protect its cultural purity and independence in an era of demographic decline. Supporters see it as a moral revival grounded in national pride. Critics warn it fuels xenophobia and pseudoscience. Though minor electorally, Sanseito's rhetoric reflects Japan's growing nativist sentiment and cultural anxiety.